Today we're going to begin Chapter 3, and you can see by your packet, Chapter 3 is pretty long. Now in Chapter 2 we started talking about quadratics and we graphed them. Here in Chapter 3 we're going to be solving quadratic equations. First, take a moment and copy down the definitions in your journal, page 47. Next, take a look at the core concepts. We're going to be looking at these first three methods of solving quadratics. There are more to come. The first method we're going to look at is by graphing. And you can graph using the graphing calculator or Desmos, which is on your computer. Now we already know how to graph by hand. We've already tested on that, so that's why now we're allowing you to use a graphing calculator or Desmos. Then the next method is using square roots. And you're going to use square roots when there is no bx term in the problem. Then we're going to learn how to solve by factoring. So you have to know all the types of factoring. Let's write down our step-by-step directions. The first method, by graphing. Step 1 will be make the equation equal to 0. Step 2, we're going to graph the equation on the calculator or Desmos and type in your equation. Make sure you always use x as your variable. After you have it graphed, you're going to calculate the 0. So on the TI-84 that we use, the buttons that you will press are second, trace, and then you're going to click 0. You then need to go to the left of the 0, that's where it crosses the x-axis, and click enter. Then you're going to go to the right of the same exact 0, or the x-intercept, click enter, and then hit enter one more time. And it'll then calculate the 0, or where the graph crosses the x-axis. You'll then need to repeat that step for the other 0. The next method is solving by taking square roots. Step 1. You need to get whatever is being squared by itself. So get the squared part by itself. Step 2. Take the square root of each side. When you add the square root, don't forget you need to add plus or minus, because the square root could be a positive root or a negative root. And then your final step will be to solve for x, or whatever variable we're using. Our last method for this video is by factoring. To solve by factoring, first you want to equal the equation to 0. Then we're going to factor the equation. Once you factor it, you make each factor, or each of the smaller parentheses, equal to 0, and then you can solve them. Now let's go to the notes. Before you do go to the notes, take a look at the next page of your journal, page 48, and we will be looking at the zero product property when we get into solving by factoring. But you can read this here now. Looking at our notes, in example 1, we want to solve quadratics by graphing. So the direction, step 1 says equal to 0. In example 1a, we are already equal to 0. Next, we're going to type the equation into a graphing calculator or into Desmos. Here in Desmos, you can type the equation. The equation is x squared minus x minus 6. You do not write equals 0. You can sketch the graph on your paper. But what we are looking for are the x-intercepts. And you can see the x-intercept right here at -2, 0, and another one here at 3, 0. And that would be your solutions. So you can plot your solutions on your notes. The graph crossed through -2 and 3, and it was a happy face. I'm okay with the vertex not showing. The key point here is where it crosses the x-axis at -2 and 3. Let's try example 1b. If you read in the journal, step 1 is we need to equal it to 0. So I'm going to subtract 4x to the other side. I will put it in standard form, which means the highest exponent first and to the lowest exponent. Now that it's equal to 0, we can graph this in our calculator. Here in Desmos, I graphed the equation. And you can see here the graph crosses only one time at the x-axis at the point -1, 0. So the graph crosses at -1, 0. and we can draw our upside down parabola. When we go to use the graphing calculator, I'll show you the directions, how to use it in the calculator. What you'll have to do is you'll calculate the 0 in your calculator, and you're going to have to make your calculator go to the left of the point and then the right of the point, and then your calculator will give you the coordinates of the 0. We'll try that in class tomorrow. Let's look at solving by square roots. If you read the directions in the journal, step 1 is to get the thing that's being squared by itself. So in A, only x is being squared. So we need to get rid of the 4 and the 31. So first we're going to add the 31 to the other side. That gives us 80. Then we can divide both sides by 4, and I get x squared equals 20. Once the thing that's being squared is by itself, you're going to take the square root of both sides. A square root and a square will cancel each other out, and we have x equals plus or minus, that's either the positive or the negative root of the square root of 20. Now you've already practiced simplifying radicals, so let's do that now. 20 can break down to 4 times 5, and 4 breaks down to 2 times 2. Whenever you have a couple, the couple comes out of the radical, and the single stays inside. So x will equal plus or minus 2 radical 5. Let's look at B. Just the x is being squared here. So first let's subtract 9 to the other side. Then we can divide by 3. Then we can take the square root to get rid of the square symbol. X equals plus or minus the square root of a negative? That does not make sense. In fact, this would be no real solution. You cannot take the square root of a negative number. Let's look at C. This time, what is being squared here? In this problem, x plus 3 is all being squared. So the first thing we need to do is get rid of, so we need to get rid of the 2/5. You could divide both sides by 2/5, but that's the same as multiplying each side by the reciprocal, or 5/2. So 5/2 times 2/5 will cancel. I'm left with x plus 3 squared equals, here I'm going to multiply 5 times 5 and 2 times 1 and get 25 over 2. Now what's being squared is by itself, so we can take the square root of each side. When you take the square root of a fraction, you can take the square root of the top and the square root of the bottom. Now on the left, the square root and a square will cancel. On the right, we can figure out the square root of 25. That'll be 5. Don't forget your plus minus in front. And the square root of 2 does not simplify. But this is not proper form. We have a radical in the denominator. So you should rationalize. That means whatever radical is in the bottom, multiply it top and bottom. In my numerator, I will then have 5 times radical 2, or 5 radical 2, over radical 2 times radical 2 is a regular 2. Finally, to solve for x, I can subtract 3. As a little trick, try and put that negative 3 right in front of the plus minus. So our answer will be negative 3 plus or minus 5 radical 2 over 2. Please have any questions ready for tomorrow. We'll do the monitoring progress together. We're going to save solve by factoring for the next video.